Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Wanner. I'm the director for the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission. First of all, I just want to welcome all of you to the 2020 Upper Midwest Aviation Symposium. Thanks for coming today. So by attending this safety seminar or by attending one of the past programs around the country, you're fulfilling one of the requirements to be an aerial applicator in the state of North Dakota. And so I just want to remind everybody here today that we're also recording this for those who are unable to attend today and they're able to watch online. If you are watching online, make sure to complete the online questionnaire after the video to ensure that we have it recorded that you have watched the video. For everybody here as well, if you do have a question for any of the presenters, I just want to ask that you come to the middle of the room and ask your question on the microphone right there, just so that we can all hear the question on the video as well. And so with that, as always, we have some great speakers for you. We're going to hear from the Department of Agriculture, we're going to hear from our Unmanned Aircraft Systems Test Site, and from Jay Flowers with the FAA. FSDO office, and Andy Tybert, as always, gives a great talk and update from an aerial applicator's perspective. So I hope you enjoy the presentations we have here for you this afternoon. And so to start, we're going to welcome our first speaker, Jeremiah Lean from the Department of Agriculture. So let's give him a round of applause.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get started so I don't keep you guys held up. All right, so WPS Worker Protection Standard, that changed in 2017, so now everybody has to do annual training and record that training, basically the who, what, or who was there, where you're at, time, date, and keep that on file. Post no entry signs if the REI is over 48 hours. And early entry workers have to be 18, handlers have to be 18. And that annual training now, there's no grace period. It has to be as soon as they're dealing with chemical, they need to be trained. Human endangerment, there was an increase again with that, both with ground applications and aerial. So again, just make sure you're cognizant that there's no people right by the application site, wind direction, farmsteads, those types of things. That's of course a very serious violation. The fines are significantly higher, and you know, and that's something they take serious based on the risk, of course. For your records, part of the slides here is cut off, but everything on this slide here and the next slide needs to be in your record form. If you need that information, just send me an email or a text or something and I'll forward it on to you. I'll have my contact information up at the end of the presentation. Make sure you're putting your start and stop times, and then use either military time or put AM, PM. If you leave that blank, then you end up owning those whole 24 hours. And so if somebody files a complaint against you, and they look at your records and it just says 8, then you'll end up owning from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And so if the wind speed at 8 in the morning was, you know, 7 miles an hour, 8 in the evening it was 20 some, well now you're just, you got yourself in trouble. So make sure you put the AM, PM or use military time. Fill them all within 24 hours of the application and keep them for 3 years. And there's the rest of the stuff that's required in the records. Paraquat training, you can go to this website, or again just email me and I'll forward you the link. Need to do that and do it every 3 years. I think it took me a half an hour when I went through it, basically watching a video and answering a few questions. But depends on how fast, but somewhere probably in that half hour to 45-minute mark it'll probably take you. And then make sure you print off the certificate and keep that with you as well. Atrazine, now if you went through, I had this in my slides for probably since they started doing the water sampling. But the numbers keep going up as far as what their detects, and so make sure you're paying attention to any areas where there's surface water. Probably a little bit more difficult for you guys, but I tell the ground applicators anyways, a lot of these labels, and I imagine atrazine has it on there, where it'll say do not apply if your soils are permeable and the depth to groundwater's 30 feet or less. And I'm just paraphrasing from another label, but anyways, so then in those cases, you could not apply that product due to the soil permeability and then the depth to groundwater. So just be cognizant of that. If there is a potential for downpour or something and runoff, those types of things. We've been doing water sampling since 2013 around the state, and it's 30 sites. It's nothing too high tech. You basically drive up to a bridge, lower a sterile bottle down into the river, pull it up and send it off to be tested. So from 2013 to 2017, they found 859 out of the 948 river and streams samples collected, so it's a 92% finding. It's found at levels that are 25 times at the levels that would impact aquatic plants. That's 1 part per billion. And then the high levels are usually found for short periods of time, thankfully, but it's still not a good thing. There was a couple, and I don't have the most recent data, they haven't gotten that to me yet, but so it ends in 2017 here, and the slides are cut off at the end, but I'll read them off to you. So in 2016 and 2017, they had 2 detects, or I shouldn't say 2 detects, there's more than 2, but the highest detect was 5.3 parts per billion, and I think it's 7.6 parts per billion. So that's way above the human level of benchmark is 3 parts per billion, so that's over double on some of those. Yeah, 7.6 it says there. There was 11 significant detections. Let me see, I covered a lot of that already. Some of the other ones were 2,4-D, bentazone, metachlor, it's cut off here, but I think it's prometachlor maybe, not 100%, but acetochlor and tebuconazole. Most of those were in a large number of the samples, but they were at low levels. Still not obviously a good thing, but then some of the ones that were found at above level of concern were atrazine, metachlor, acetochlor, malathion, chlorpyrifos, and metylsulfuron methyl. And then malathion, chlorpyrifos, metylsulfuron methyl were rarely detected, but when they were, the levels were pretty significant. So we'll continue to monitor it. As far as atrazine goes, EPA is aware of it. We're not the only state with issues. And whenever there are these types of things, it usually doesn't come out to a positive outcome for applicators as far as using the product. Usually there'll be more restrictions. It's hard to say. It's undergoing a registration review as well. And they told me that's about a 5-year process, and I think there's probably another year or 2 left of that. So what happens, it's hard to say. More than likely there could be more restrictions on using the product. So again, just do your best and try to avoid any types of issues like that. All right, the BMAP, and depending on when you got certified last, you may have seen this already, but it's interactive. And so you can create an account, and beekeepers can create an account. And so when you do that, if somebody puts an apiary site in your location, you'd be notified, and vice versa. If you set up a watch area or something like that, I think they call it, they get notified that you're going to make an application. So it's more interactive now. And what you do is you go to that site, and I think, do you have that link on your guys' webpage, right, as well? So, so there's a couple different ways you can get it, and if you can't find it, just send one of us an email or contact us and we'll get it to you. But they also have vineyards and organic on there as well. They're not required to list their locations, but a lot of them put them on there anyways, so it doesn't hurt to check it out. But if you're only concerned with apiaries, you click on that. Oops. Yeah, when you first go to it, it'll look like this, so you get a bunch of dots to pop up. Then you zoom in, and then you'll get contact information to the area where you'd be spraying at. And so then you can try to work something out, potentially, if there is, say you're doing a insecticide application, and potentially see if they'll cover their hives, move them, or something like that. And then also you're aware of that they're there. Safe Send, now most of you probably participated in it, but it's a free non-regulatory pesticide collection program. There's going to be some changes this year. We're funded on a biennium basis, so every 2 years we get money allocated to us. Last year was the first year of that cycle, and we went through the complete budget in 1 year. We collected, I think, 520-some thousand pounds of pesticides last year. And so they found some more money to allocate to still hold Safe Send this year, but we're not taking any shuttles. It has to be 30 gallons or less, so 30 gallon drums or two and a halves basically. 3,000 pound max per participant. 8 sites is all we're going to be at, and those, if we have enough money to run through all 8, we'll be at all of them. But say if after first 6 we run out of money, the remaining 2 would be shut down, or whatever number it comes to. So you have to just really pay attention this year, and we'll be doing press releases and stuff as well, so to make sure that it hasn't been shut down. Under a normal year, this is kind of a big deal. This year it's not going to be as big of a deal, but if it's over 1,000 pounds under a normal year, give me a call about a week in advance, so that way I can let the contractor know, because they're coming from out of state and they need to know how many trucks to send up here to haul it away. So otherwise you may get turned away. Now this, like I said, this year it's not going to matter, but in future years, because the 1 year somebody showed up with 16,000 pounds, I think it was. We didn't know about it, and they had a truck breakdown too on top of it all, so we had to turn them away. So we don't accept rinseate, don't accept empty containers, and then again, pesticides only. Ag side's good about not trying to bring paint or oil, but they'll try to bring adjuvants or surfactants. We don't take those aren't pesticides. And then I said no rinseate as well, or no fertilizer. The collection times are from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And under a normal year, we have the 8 core sites, which we'll hopefully be able to do all 8 this year. And then we'll also, under a normal year, we'll have 4 sites that rotate that are the same every other year. So we'll have an even and an odd year on the ones that rotate. Now this year, it'll just be the 8 core sites. So these are the sites that we'll be at this year, providing that we have enough funding to go through all 8. Now on a normal odd year, this would be the sites. This would be an even year, I guess, anyways, but don't show up to these ones this year, because nobody will be there besides the DOT workers. All right, and with that, I have my contact information up. Feel free to give me a call or text or email. I'm non-regulatory, so I didn't say that starting off. I look for the same things that inspectors look for, basically, but it's a freebie with me. I don't report back to anybody. I don't tell anybody what I see. So if I see something, like say you didn't have a sign up or you had a drain, open drain or something, I'd let you know about it, and then that's as far as it goes. I don't report back, so. Does anybody have any questions over any of that?
Any questions for Jeremiah?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right, appreciate those updates. Our next presenter is Jakey Stoltz. He's the Director of Operations for our UAS test site in North Dakota. So let's give Jakey a hand.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So we'll get the first question out of the way. Can you fly in this wind? And the answer is no. So maybe, yeah. Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's a couple of years now I've been doing this. So what we're going to try and do here is just kind of give an overview of what the test site's doing in the state. We do a lot of operations all over the country, but we'll kind of keep it focused here to what's going on in North Dakota. It used to be that I was able to go over like every project that we were doing on a given year, but we just have so much going on these days that it's kind of impossible to do that anymore. So kind of give you guys just a quick rundown of who we are in case you haven't heard of us. We have been here a couple of years in a row now, but we're one of 7 FAA test sites now based in Grand Forks. We also support this integration pilot program. There was 10 of those designated across the U.S. Now there's only 9, but we do support kind of 2 big federal programs, and then one of the big areas that I'm going to talk about in this briefing is this new statewide UAS network that the state has appropriated dollars for, and we kind of do the day-to-day program management of that. So, but really our mission is to work with the FAA and industry to integrate UAS into the national airspace. So we're UAS experts. We know lots about 107 and small UAS, but we also do a lot of advanced beyond visual line of sight, large aircraft, just things that you can't really quite do in the current regulation set. So it's kind of a wide variety of things that we do and support. So if you remember last year's presentation, I'm just going to kind of hit on a couple of those that when I did this last year, I said, here's what's coming. And so now just looking back in 2019, a couple things that we capped off. So we supported XL Energy. They're one of the leaders with UAS. They conducted 2,300 miles of transmission line inspections across the United States last year. And so that was a big success. Some of that was done beyond visual line of sight. So they were flying a small UAS, a single rotor helicopter, upwards of 10 miles on a given leg at some times. So really one of the first cases with small UAS that it actually was scaled. So they were able to do operations across 10 different states and cover 2,300 miles. And all that data now is kind of being processed to look for defects in their lines and stuff, so they can be more proactive on their maintenance and keep the power running. So that was pretty cool. One of the big projects we had in the Red River Valley was looking at beyond visual line of sight infrastructure, some radios and some radars, kind of all networked together to support advanced operations. That has finished, but it's kind of morphed now into this statewide UAS network program, which I'll hit on in a little bit. But good success there. General Atomics, we've been working with them for years and years and years now. We kind of worked an approval on the research side where they use a ground-based radar to go do their operations without a chase plane. Just last year they were able to essentially get a civil approval to do that, and now they're using that concept of operation every day out there. So where they used to have to follow their UAS with a chase plane out of the Grand Forks Air Force Base, now they just take off. They use a radar, and a guy helps them monitor the airspace and avoid manned traffic. So lots of efficiencies gained there. And then that last bullet there really, so last year when I presented, at that time it was just going through the legislation cycle, and we were at that time pretty confident it was going to go through, but it did come to pass, and so I'll hit more on that in a little bit, but that's a really unique program to North Dakota that you're going to see more of in the coming years here. Another thing that we did in 2019, and we're going to look to expand on that this year, is we supported some flood UAS flying in Grand Forks. So we kind of called this just a pilot project. It was just in the Grand Forks area, up and down the Red River a little bit. And so we just took small UAS, we used them to do things like bridge inspections, looking for ice dams. That's kind of what you see in that picture there. It's much more dramatic from the air, where you can kind of see it really backed up for a ways there. So looking at the bridges, just looking at some overland flooding, some of the interstates where the overland flooding does kind of encroach on the lanes, and they actually have to either close a lane down or sometimes even close the whole highway down. And so we helped city officials actually make better decisions in some cases, whether it was closing those roads down if they had to close them early or they had more time than they thought. Bridge closings was another thing. We actually helped them open one earlier. So after they close a bridge and it floods, they have to go inspect it, and that involves kind of hanging over the edge looking for defects or timber wedged into places. So we were able to kind of get a UAS under there and do that inspection for them. And then kind of interestingly, the third bullet there really was kind of I would say like a surprise bonus on why these were useful. So just posting some of the imagery like this one on social media from the city standpoint actually reduced the volume of calls that they were getting at their public safety center. And just kind of kept citizens informed, so less people were out on the dikes, looking and kind of trying to get a sense of what was going on. So just kind of a nice benefit there beyond just the kind of the engineering data of it. So we'll be looking to expand that this year, actually across the whole state, and we'll be organizing that. Like I said, this project, this is actually the screen or the slide from last year. That project has finished, and it's kind of morphed into the statewide UAS program. But we did do some operations in the Red River Valley this last year, and we did, whether you knew it or not, interacted with some ag sprayers that were in the area. Though we were out of their way and all, but we did see some, and that was definitely a part of our flying life out there, was coordinating with them and making sure we were vigilant to those guys. Just to get, I threw this in here, this is a slide from last year as well, but just to get us an idea of what types of UAS we work with. So everybody's kind of familiar with DJI and Phantoms and Mavics, if you know those names, but we're usually talking much larger aircraft. So this is about a 55-pound aircraft with actually has a gas generator slung underneath there. And that's what primarily provides the power during flight. So these are much bigger UAS. They're starting to get a little more advanced. And that's really what we need to kind of start doing these advanced operations beyond visualized sight, over people, and so on. So, okay, so what is coming up this year that's kind of going on in the state? Things that you guys might want to be looking for, or just kind of keeping up to date on where we're at and what kind of operations we're doing. And there's a lot of them. This is, again, just the things that are going on in North Dakota. We're doing ops all over the country, but these are just North Dakota things. So we're supporting some DHS and CBP. They call it air domain awareness, but essentially northern border protection. They're starting to have interest in being able to know what's coming and going across the border. And you kind of think about the southern border, all the focus is there with walls and all this physical infrastructure, but they're looking at the northern border more from a technology-based type of, just understanding and awareness of what's going on there. So just using different systems to detect UAS, all the way from tiny little UAS to ultralights to bigger aircraft. And the technology is still not very well understood, so they're trying to understand if it's radars or RF sensing types of equipment that can detect these. Maybe it's electro-optical. They just don't quite know yet, and they don't know what performance capabilities they all have. So we're doing some testing with them so they can understand what's out there in the market right now and what it can and can't detect and so on. Like I mentioned, the flood operations, so we started that last year just in the Grand Forks area, but we're going to be looking to deploy that really anywhere that flooding is occurring in the state this spring. So Obviously, the Red River Valley is a big focus area, but Minot here, Jamestown, Devils Lakes areas, wherever there's kind of seasonal flooding, we expect to be supporting that. So we'll be working with a bunch of different operators across the state, making sure that they're trained and operating at the a professional level to support this, and then kind of organizing them all. So who's where, who's doing what operations on a given day, and then making sure that the data gets into the right hands, whether that's the cities or the Department of Emergency Services, public safety, whoever needs to see that data. So that'll be something coming up here really quick. And then Xcel Energy and the likes will continue to expand those operations. So they did 2,300 miles this last year. Be looking to do maybe double that this year, just keep pushing the boundaries on that. So I'm going to hit a little bit more on that one in a second. That one in particular is something that could impact ag sprayers or be in that same type of airspace. So we'll hit on that one a little bit more. And then the only one, I have a couple more slides. So the only one that I don't really have slides on is just that last bullet there, advanced air mobility. So I've briefed on this in the past. It's still many, many, many years out, but there's starting to be some pretty academic type of research with NASA and some of these groups on enabling essentially large electric aircraft. It's almost hard to call them unmanned because the goal is to carry passengers around someday. That's maybe 10, 20 years down the line. But what we might start to see sooner than that is maybe some cargo operations, maybe aircraft that are a couple 100 pounds. Types of use cases, if you think of like FedEx, they fly a big aircraft into Fargo every night, and then they dump it all into a bunch of caravans, and then every day those caravans go out and back. Why not do that with UAS, something that's just every day, day in and day out, this thing happens, and it's all scheduled and repeatable. So maybe we can do that with UAS. So some of that type of research. Okay, so to hit on the linear infrastructure inspection just for a minute. So this one is fairly predictable where they're at. They're almost always flying within 100 feet vertically of transmission line, within 20 feet laterally. They essentially fly just right down the line, imaging it, and fairly close in. So this shouldn't be an impact to egg sprayers when you're transiting, as long as you're staying 500 feet above those structures. But where it could be, where we could see issues is when you're actually spraying and you're coming up over transmission lines and kind of back down into the field. So, of course, we're always vigilant for egg sprayers. We're using technology to detect you guys and stay out of the way. So this last Xcel Energy, they're using a combination of radars, ADS-B and visual observers to do that. But it is worth mentioning, that you might start to see this more and more as other not just Xcel Energy starts to implement this in their inspection process. So again, just kind of a note, these things are there. They'll start being there probably more and more. They do file NOTAMs as well for these operations. So on the last slide, I have a couple tips, just on how we can work better together, and that's one of them, is just keep an eye on those NOTAMs as well. So I think. So last year there actually was a line they did between Grand Forks and Fargo, Xcel Energy did. I'm not sure if there'll be any North Dakota lines this year on that, but just bears mentioning to kind of be on the lookout for those. Okay, so North Dakota Statewide UAS Network. This one is going to be definitely a big initiative in the next year and a half, because we're about a little over half year into the biennium. And really, this is set to be more like a 10-year program, kind of just in 2-year chunks. So this is the first, you can almost call it kind of seed money to get things going, and then this will just continue to expand over the next 10 years, hopefully. But for the first 2 years, North Dakota appropriated $28 million. The test site is, like I said, kind of the program manager for this effort. We have an individual who's essentially dedicated to this project to make it happen. At this point, we've actually just recently selected 3 prime system engineering companies, we're calling them, L3 Harris, Talas, and Collins. Might be companies that you guys are familiar with. L3 Harris does the ADS-B network for the FAA. So these are some of the largest aviation companies in the world that are that bid and were selected to actually help us roll this out. So pretty cool to see that level and that caliber of company essentially working for the state to deploy this. And so what's the goal here? So we're trying to essentially put together an infrastructure to support advanced operations. If you think about manned aircraft, nav aids, airports, just all the system services and procedures that are in place, you don't, as an expert, you don't have to go build that out yourself. It's just there, you pay for it, there's taxes, whatever. That's not really there with unmanned air operations yet. Everybody's kind of building their own thing and putting their own safety cases together, and it's just really inefficient when Xcel Energy and BNSF and all these guys are kind of trying to build their own little ecosystem. So the state is kind of going to take a lead and essentially try and build something out that can support all those guys, just like the manned aviation ecosystem we have. So what will it include? Well, short term, we're pretty much looking at kind of 3 core services. So command and control links, you have to have a robust, reliable link to your aircraft at all times to be able to fly at long distances and longer endurances. So some type of system that will support that communication. We're looking at surveillance, so whether that's radars or, like I said, some of that same technology maybe that can detect UAS might also be used for this. So radars, electro-optical systems, acoustic systems. We're in progress of developing this architecture right now, but it will include some type of service that is able to detect manned aircraft out there, maybe other unmanned aircraft, and kind of help everybody coordinate in that airspace. And then all that will be connected via some network to a network operations center. So just like ADS-B, there's a network operations center that is constantly monitoring all the towers, all the latency, if anything has gone down, if it needs to be fixed, and so on. So essentially there'll be some sort of center that is monitoring all this, making sure it's all working within spec and notifying pilots if something does go down or need maintenance and so on. And so once this is in place, then ideally these operators can just kind of bring their aircraft. It probably has to be equipped to some level, just like IFR or VFR. The pilot will probably have to be trained to some level, again, and they'll be able to come to this network and sort of plug in and then go do advanced operations without having to build out the system themselves like we currently do. So yeah, that's kind of a quick overview. The target right now, so we have these 3 systems integrators on board. We're developing the architecture as we speak, and we'll be working with those 3 over the next, say, 6 to 9 months to kind of figure out what are we actually going to put in the ground. And so the target is to have something in the ground by January 2021 and start getting those early adopters actually utilizing it. So could be companies like Eyesight RPV and Skyscopes who are just doing the UAS ops for companies. It could be the companies themselves if they're doing internal operations like Xcel Energy. We're really looking to enable state agencies to use this, so DOT, Department of Emergency Services, and so on. Essentially everybody. We want this to be commercial and scalable at the end of the day. And so here's just, a litany of use cases that we're looking at and companies that we're talking to right now on just a variety of things that we can do with this. And kind of the options are unlimited, but we're making sure we're focused here in this first year to make sure we kind of find those early adopters to make good use of this. So, okay. So kind of wrap up and leave a few minutes for questions, but I kind of always like using this slide because it's true. So you've probably all seen this technology adoptance curve where you peak and then you go into the trough of disillusionment and eventually get productivity. And that's sort of true with the UAS industry, but it's kind of more like this, to be honest. So we're always pushing the boundaries. North Dakota has definitely taken a lead in this UAS initiative. The statewide UAS network, there's nothing like it in the country. So there'll certainly be other states kind of looking and watching what North Dakota is doing, and it's kind of fun to be on the edge of that. So it's kind of hard to tell where we're at sometimes in this up and down, but the the idea is it's always going up. So even if there's some ups and downs in there. Okay, so tips, just, how can we make sure that we're all working together in the airspace here? These are just kind of my, 5 simple things. So, we do post NOTAMs when there's a chance that the operations we're doing are probably going to affect, some type of manned aircraft. Generally speaking, for like visual line of sight, 400 feet and below, we don't post NOTAMs because there'd just be too many of them. But when they get a little more advanced, beyond visual line of sight, maybe higher altitude, we do tend to post NOTAMs, and we try and be specific about them, more specific times, specific areas, instead of just a big circle somewhere. So do keep an eye on those. Radio comms. So not that we're necessarily going to talk to you, but we are listening when we're near airports. So as long as you're kind of making your usual radio calls, that helps us hear and just kind of have a better situational awareness on where you are, and then we can react appropriately. Follow the regulations. It kind of sounds dumb, but really, if you're predictable and you're within those kind of normal regulation, envelopes, then that helps us kind of fit in properly. We have seen many times where egg sprayers are flying, let's say like 500 feet below or within 500 feet of structures as they're transiting. And so the assumption is you're not there, and so that we can be there. So when you are there, that kind of can cause issues. So as long as you guys are staying in kind of your envelopes, we can kind of best avoid you guys. ADS-B out is almost a for sure way to be seen at this point. We almost always have ADS-B in capability. UAS at this time are not broadcasting ADS-B. The FAA is essentially prohibiting it, so don't expect to see us on your TISB screens. But if you have it and you're broadcasting, it's almost a guaranteed way for us to see you. So I know that it's not required in essentially 100% of North Dakota airspace, but for those that do have it, it's certainly helpful. But bottom line, it's kind of cut off on the bottom there, but bottom line is we're still responsible for avoiding you. So, that'll still be the case, and that's a huge part of the research, is making sure that we can see everybody that's out there and stay out of the way, essentially. So that is still the case and will continue to be. Okay, so kind of went through that quick, but hopefully there's some questions. And contact information is there as well, but we could find a mic.
Is there a lot of order up there?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay.
What's your question, Brian?
So, the ag industry probably isn't going to adopt ADS-B real fast, although I know some guys are. I was wondering how effective your other methods of detection are. You mentioned acoustic and radar. Are they going to be able to suffice for ADS-B?
Yeah, so the assumption is that you don't have it. So yeah, I put it up there as a, fully understanding that a lot aren't equipped and don't have to be. So the radar systems that we're looking at using, they're almost too good in a sense. They see so much more than the aircraft, trees and birds and vehicles and this and that. So from that standpoint, the challenge actually isn't seeing you, it's knowing if you're an airplane or a bird, which is kind of backwards. So a lot of work being done on those to, algorithms that can filter out noise and make sure we see manned aircraft. And that's not necessarily new technology, but it's new in this kind of space. So we have to see so low to the ground that's where those challenges kind of start to come in with trees and birds. The other systems that we're looking at, acoustic, not widely used yet, but there's a lot of research being done on them. I would expect there'll be a few approvals here and there that use them, and basically what they do is they set up an antenna array that can just hear aircraft within, say, 2 to 3 miles. It depends on the technology. And then if you put enough of those on an area, you kind of have that coverage. But you know, at the end of the day, the bar is very high. The FAA is not giving out approvals for, you know, just any system that's out there and can detect manned aircraft. I've heard, you know, 70% detection rates, not cutting it. We've seen companies try and get approvals for that. So there's a lot of work still being done, and the bar is high. So yeah, we'll continue to see that research being done to figure out how good they are and how good they aren't. So yeah.
Any other questions?
I just have one thing to add. I don't have a microphone here, but you can all hear me. Hopefully you can hear me up there. Just so you guys know, Jakey is one of our drone pros. He got put on about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions whatsoever about the drone community or what's going on with drones, he's the man you need to talk to if you can't get a hold of somebody at the local FISDO. So there's actually 3 of you, right? I think there's
Maybe
3 or
even more.
4 of you.
Yeah.
I got to look. It's been a while here. So, but that are in the directory. If you go to fasafety.gov, you can look in there for directory. Just query Drone Pro, and it'll bring up everybody that has, you know, basically the knowledge, like Jakey does in whatever to answer your questions. So, one thing that I call them the "we're going to tell you, but we'll shoot you if you tell somebody else" meetings with the Gaza meetings, is that ADS-B in drones right now, the reason you're not seeing a lot of it in drones, the manufacturers are okay with it, but how do you let them shut it off in airspace that's so congested so that air traffic can see something on the radar instead of a bunch of little blips? So I'll give you an example. When you have drones out there that are doing fireworks shows, if it's a blanket clause of ADS-B, can you imagine 5,000 drones all with ADS-B going off within a 1 mile area? And so these are some of the complications that they're running into. So until we get the manufacturers to really figure out a way for it so that we don't end up short, or rather, you know, get you guys in trouble for that, what it allows us to do right now, we're working on that. So if we do get ADS-B, we'll say, okay, if you're out in the A community, let's say, or out in the middle of grassland USA, that ADS-B must be turned on in your drone. But again, we've got to figure that part out about when you shut it off or when can you shut it off. So it is being worked on.
Thanks, Jay.
Are you aware of any current projects? Are you aware of any current projects or future projects of drones being used for actual aerial application of pesticides?
Yeah, so we're going to have a meeting after about that after this, actually. So there's a lot of interest. I know NDSU has done some, I'll say, pilot projects as well at some of their extension centers. I don't think, though, Kyle, that anybody's widely using it yet. I think it's just some kind of one-offs, but lots of interest. So
There's one operator in Minnesota right now that's working on that very hard. So.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll be meeting afterwards to talk just about that exactly. So yeah.
Any other questions? All right, let's give Jakey a round of applause.
Yeah, like Jakey mentioned, afterwards we're going to have just a conversation. It'll be public. Anybody who wants to stick around can definitely stick around. But you know, we want to partner with the Department of Agriculture, with the North Dakota Aerial Applicators Association, just to talk about some of these, you know, future UAS operations that can occur, and just to be proactive and start having some conversations that could lead to potentially a work group that meets every once in a while to continue these conversations. And so thanks again to our test site. You know, these guys are just professionals in this arena. I've been working with them for a very long time now. I sit on the executive board that oversees our test site. So I can tell you firsthand that these guys are doing the best they can to make sure that safety is their #1 priority. And we at the Aeronautics Mission are very aware of, obviously, a lot of these initiatives. The big one currently being the statewide Beyond Visual Line of Sight network that our state is investing over $28 million in. And so we're watching that with a fervor, and we want to make sure that anything that happens in the UAS world that it's safely integrated with current manned operations that are happening. So I appreciate all the comments that Jay made earlier too, and just another reminder, if you see illegal or unsafe operations, make sure you're reporting it. Make sure the FSDO office knows that those UAS operations were occurring. And for the most part, it's been kind of quiet. There have been some issues that we've been known of in the past, and a lot of the issues that we have are because of the hobbyists. It's not the professionals that are trying to do whatever they can to make sure that safety is a priority. And so just continual education is incredibly important. And another thing I want to mention too is during the symposium here this Tuesday, I believe it's Tuesday afternoon, is that right, Mike? We have a panel that we have a couple of different experts in the UAS industry that are presenting, so I hope all of you have the opportunity to attend that session later this week. And it's just an exciting industry that we're excited to be a part of as well. And so with that, we're going to jump now over to Andy Tybert, aerial applicator here in North Dakota. He's going to talk about some mechanical updates and just overall information for you to learn about how to be an awesome aerial applicator. So let's give Andy Tybert a hand.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Andy Tybert, and just going to touch on a few things on maintenance. Just a few weeks back, we were at the Tri-State Applicators Conference in St. Cloud, and they put up a graph during the PASS program that sort of intrigued me. And I don't have a slide of it, but the graph was about accident causes. And 65% were human factors, 32% mechanical, and 3% undetermined. And the 32% mechanical was a part I'd like to touch on. They don't have those statistics diagnosed or segregated out as to causes. But I can only read into them a little bit that some are simply, you rarely hear of a plane of just a wing came off or something like that, or we would all hear of that, and that isn't usually the cause of an accident. But some of the things that we do run into are like neglected maintenance or deferred maintenance. How far can you defer maintenance until it rolls from deferred into neglected? You can take a simple thing like brakes. How far do you let your brake pads go until they've gone past the minimums, till they're rubbing on the rivets and the rivets are sheared off and the pads are gone, and suddenly you're landing on somewhere and you go to hit your brakes and are ending up in the ditch. So there's just a few things like that I think we could do a better job of now we have time. We have the rest of the spring here before spray season. Kind of take a look at some of the things that you may have coming up. Things like life-limited parts. How close are you? Will they make it all the way to next season or the end of the season, or will you be doing some maintenance mid-season? Just some different things to think about on there. I forgot an article here. Stand by. This one? Okay. Just on Friday afternoon, I got a email from AOPA, and they always run across several different things from operations and things like that. But one of the things that they had in here was an article from on turboprop engine repairs for less. One of the things that struck me very funny about reading through this article and I'm not going to, if you want to look it up, you sure can. It's on the AOPA website. But the particular engine overhaul facility that they were talking about turbo repairs for less happens to be one we did business with several years back. And because, boy, the front side, they did offer out a cheaper price. And which was, you know, of course, who doesn't want to save some money? So we ended up doing some business with them, and the engine we got back was high temperatures, low power output, and we struggled with that throughout an entire summer. And rolled into the next year, and we just had enough. The airplane, the temps were at maximums. The power output was, well, couldn't even haul a full load anymore, and finally stopped flying it. It came off and went to another very well-known overhaul facility, and on dismantling the engine, it was loaded up with the wrong parts. And so we're kind of getting we did get our lesson very well learned, only about 100 grand later, about, you know, trying to save a few dollars on the onset. And just because, you know, do your homework on a reputable, well-noted facility is all I'm kind of getting at. Sometimes that luring cheap price is not always the best deal you can get. A couple of things that I was going to run across next, of course, I'm kind of rebounding back to the old, right from the beginning again, is on seat belts. I know these are in your airplanes, and they get old. This set happens to be one to remove from service, and it's very well faded. Even the back side of the belts are faded, and just kind of watch those. Those are some things you're going to want to, you know, take care of. This happens to be a set. It's a new set. It's all padded up. Both lap and shoulder are padded up. If you notice one thing that's interesting on this one, the shoulder harness is sewn into the lap belt instead of everybody's zip ties or tie wraps. Their shoulder harness to their lap belt and stuff. This one happens to be sewn right together. I don't sell these things, but if you get a hold of me, I can relay some of the information that I have learned over the years about acquiring these. One last thing I was going to show you is all these airplanes come out with a cool seat, and if I was to have to fly in that cool seat anymore, I'd have to be out of this business. I'm good for about an hour and a half to 2 hours in that cool seat for the day, and then I'm done. This is actually a cool seat frame that was sent into a facility, and they have the repair station authorization to take the netting off, and they rebuild up with you know, memory foam and a lumbar support, and you know, kind of basically rebuild this on your frame. And the cost of doing this is comparable with just getting a new back and bottom nets. So if there again, if any of you have back problems in that cool seat or anything like that, get a hold of me. There again, I don't sell these things, but I can help you get to the right place to get one. With that, I'll open it up for questions from anyone on anything I've covered.
Questions for Andy? Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Then our next presenter for this afternoon is Jay Flowers from the FAA. Give Jay a
Okay, this is the 2020 North Dakota Area Applicators meeting held up in UMass this year in Minot, North Dakota. And my name is Jay Flowers, and I'll be your speaker during this presentation. So if you got any questions, we'll kind of give you a number here at the end. You can call me up and we can get going with that. So like I said, my name is Jay Flowers, National Fast Team ASI for Operations. I used to be the FPM, or the Fast Team Program Manager for the state of North Dakota, and moved up to Washington back in December. But I'm still very, very interested in keeping up with aviation in North Dakota, so it's one of my primaries. Fast Team Program Managers in your area, local FPMs assigned area responsibilities. Stephen Hooger hides out of South Dakota. He's out of Rapid City. Then you got Al Thimony is out of Minneapolis. And then Jeffrey Bowe, our airworthiness counterparts, local. He's Fargo boy. He's basically taking care of North and South Dakota. So FPMs are responsible for recruiting, training, and encouraging Fast Team representatives to assist in meeting the mission of our National Fast Team Performance Plan. And so if you feel like you want to become a representative of the FAA and come in as a Fast Team representative, just go to FAAsafety.gov in the upper right hand corner, and it'll say apply for the Fast Team or join the Fast Team. The Fargo Flight Standards District Office is one of 80 offices across the country, 77 geographical areas. Our manager, Mr. Nick Ewell, our assistant manager, Mr. Vance Emerson, all available for you if you have any questions. They are here to help. As I stated, Jeffrey Bowe is the FPM. He's an airworthiness guy here in North Dakota and South Dakota. Bonnie Dronen is our foundation. She's actually the money person. Cassandra Olstead, you know her as Sohn from Fargo Jet Center. She's our new ASA. John Klein, avionics. Perry Oshner is a maintenance. Brent Allen is avionics. Kelly Bosch is maintenance. JR is one of our maintenance principals. Timothy Vreeman is brand new. He's our young recruit. I shouldn't say, yeah, he's a young recruit, but he's an older guy, knows what he's doing. He's an ASI that was just hired by us, so he's in training. Joanna Speakermeyer, you know her from Fargo Jet Center. Dusty Josted, Bob Lokes, and Sean Mosher. So, the Fargo FSDO currently, the area of responsibility, keep in mind for North Dakota, or for the Fargo office, is no longer just North Dakota. It's national. We are doing certifications all over the country and helping out and assisting where we can. We've got certifications in different processes. We're working as far away as Guam, Hawaii, different places. We've got numerous operators in northern Wisconsin. We've got them all over in some parts of Minnesota and North Dakota. So there's a lot of places we're going now. So if you need help from the FSDO doing something, make sure you give them time to do it, because our inspectors are even less and less in the office every day. Registered aircraft in North Dakota, 2,264. We've got 2 Part 133 operators under our oversight. We've got 15 135 operators. There's 141 ag operators. There's 3 141 schools. We have 1 here in North Dakota. The others are in other states. 16 repair stations. We've got 1 maintenance school. We've got 80 check airmen, 189 designees, and 33 pilot examiners. If you want to become a designee for the FSDO, or you're thinking about something like that, you can go to FAA.gov and simply request a search for designees, and that'll take you to the web page, and it'll give you the directions necessary to apply for that position. As of 2/1 of 20, Airmen of North Dakota, total active airmen was 4,270. Students is up to about 200, not quite, about 150 or so anyway. Private pilots is up. Commercial pilots are down. Not much, but they're still down. ATPs at 303, up just a few. CFIs are up 25 or so. Remote pilots, 912 as compared to 561. I think we all know that the drone industry is expanding rapidly. Right now we're seeing an average of 3 times as many remote pilots going through the system as piloted aircraft pilots. So keep that in mind. Okay, the numbers for North Dakota. Total count of accidents over the last, if we look from current, basically it's the last 8 years. There was 63 accidents. Now, you won't see anything in there for 2020, even if there's been a couple. but that's simply because that they're not completed by the NTSB yet, and that's the data we go off of. 27% of those accidents, 17 of them, are ag-related. And if you look nationally, we're kind of hanging in there. About 28% of those folks are having the same issue. I'm not saying that's good, but I am saying that the problems are common across the board, and it's not just particular to North Dakota. So keep that in mind. GA fatal accidents. Now keep in mind there's been 12 fatal accidents. Total number of fatalities is a completely different number. But the ag-related, we've had one fatal accident in the ag industry, which is good. I realize you got a cage around yourself in that aircraft that's better than what they have in NASCAR, but still, that doesn't mean you need to use it. And like Andy seems to tell us, told us for several years, you know, there's a good reason why those seat belts need to be in a good condition in your aircraft, and it's because you guys are down in the weeds, in the grass, in the trees, in the power lines, all that stuff, and you need every ounce of protection you can get. Local pilot, causal factors, basic flying skills is one of the top. Pre-flight planning is another one. Weather, takeoffs and landing skills, especially to do with winds and seeing obstructions. Wires, trees, and poles. Seems like we've been hitting a lot of those here the last couple of years in North Dakota. So we got to kind of keep our heads up here a little bit more, do a little bit more investigating, especially for the ag industry. You guys are down there again. You never know if they put up a power line since last year and that's where you're spraying. So don't always count on that your field is clear. Always take a look first. Accident summary of those incidents of the 9. These are the basic, the high ends. Porpoise landings was big. Basically coming in too hot. Wrong descent angle to the runway. The nose gear hits first, bounces up. And of course, we try to be supermen and we try to recover that landing. And next thing you know, the second bounce and finally in the third bounce, we catch the propeller. And if we're lucky, we might not take off the nose gear. And off the side we go and become a runway excursion on top of a porpoise landing. Crosswind issues, it's like we're not getting enough crosswind training. And I'm thinking, in North Dakota, really? How is that possible? So, and then we have en route, which is stuff like stalls and spins that are something away from the airport. CFIT's a big one, and you did have one in the ag industry. We understand that. We had a couple of them, actually. Fuel exhaustion, we've had a couple of those. Aircraft systems knowledge, landing gear. This one was kind of interesting, a couple of them that I did read. A couple of the landing gear issues. One in particular, a kid went out and got some training. And I call him a kid affectionately. He's an adult like I am, but he was out training in the aircraft, and when he got back in the airplane after the sign-off, he took off, had a landing gear issue, couldn't figure out how to get the gear cover, the cover off the emergency gear extension handle, so he ripped it off in the process, bent it all up, threw it in the back of the airplane, only to find out later, once he was on the ground and the gear was fairly scrunched, was that the operation or the procedure, the checklist for the emergency gear extension was found on the back of the cover. And he should have known about that before he even decided to pull the cover off. Mechanical failures was another big one that we had. So, incident summary. Landing issues, okay, crosswind we talked about. Runway excursions, of course, as a result of porpoise landings or crosswind issues, not having the training. Site safety is a big one, you know, potholes, mailboxes for you guys, barbed wire fences, cars that suddenly pull out, things of that nature. Hard landings is another one, basically driving the landing gear up into the firewall or things like that. Various mechanical issues, landing gear, transmission on a helicopter. Fatigue is a big issue, and that's a decision-making one. And, you know, we always talk about safe and different terminology or the different little acronyms that tell us to check before we get in the aircraft. So, and bird strikes was another thing that was we saw pop up occasionally with incidents. So, pilot deviations, everything, surface and airspace deviations. Probably the most prominent one had to do with distraction and fatigue. And you know, we got a school up north up here, 141 school, that has a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things going on up there, and the instructors are very busy. They're working 14-hour days or more, and they're tired. And so a lot of the deviations I looked at had to do with fatigue. And of course that leads to distraction, and they miss a call on the radio, or they're not feeling good, or something goes on, or they're just nervous, or there's a lot of, like in the distractions part of it, there's nerves is in there, but fatigue is directly below that. Biased issues are still there. For those of you that haven't heard that term before, a biased issue is simply, I've taxied out on that taxiway the last 10 times I went, but this time he had me go that way. And I said, no, I'm not going that way. My brain took me that way. So, you end up basically violating 91-123, which is air traffic, because you went the wrong direction, or didn't hold short, or didn't follow instructions. And so the bias was simply is that what you're used to is not always what happens. Using proper radio frequency was another issue in pilot deviations. The overview for this training session is local and national data, accident case review. We'll talk a little bit about some of the accidents, weight and balance requirements, regulatory refresher, op specs, and then a question and answer part. And again, that'll just be a phone call. So, keeping an eye on what we need to fix. This is an important one, and this is where we start breaking down the data. Okay, so the Part 137 accidents nationally, there was 444 of them. And that's just the ag guys. This is just the ag industry. So this is not everything going on. This is just the yellow airplanes and some white ones, occasionally a green one. And so if we take a look at this data and what's out there, that's quite a few accidents. Of course, it is over that same 8 to 10 year period. So we remember that. 17 of those accidents happened in North Dakota in the last year, 8 years. Okay. And we've talked about these every year, so I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics. Funny thing about the industry is when you hear that somebody went down in an aircraft, they seem to know more about it than the FAA does, and we're the ones that investigate the accidents. So, count of accidents by month. I don't think I have to tell you when I say that, we start up usually in May, but look, June, July, and August are our big months, okay? And that's just in North Dakota. So if we really take a hard look at it, we get into some other states. Of course, I remember down in Springfield and Illinois down there, we had big growers like Jolly Green Giant and Libby's, and it was crazy. It was almost year round for some of those guys and some of the stuff they were trying to control. And then you get operators too that also will go down south and fly all winter. They don't shut it down. And since they're domiciled here in North Dakota, then that data pops up here also. So I guess I'm happy to say that either none of you are leaving North Dakota to fly in the wintertime, or you haven't had any accidents when you're away from home. Count of accidents by phase of flight. There's been 265 and 77 takeoff ones. And you see landing is next, and then of course en route. And again, this is a national look at that same 8 year period. In North Dakota alone, count of accidents by phase, maneuvering was the phase of flight that was probably catching most of our guys. What does it boil down to? Well, if maneuvering's an issue, we had, stalling the aircraft on a turn, striking a power line, any one of a number of things that happen at the end of a run. And so, like for instance on takeoff, this is where we get in. We'll talk here in just a minute about, we might have to, all of a sudden we have engine troubles and we start to lose, power or something like that. Dumping the load, making the airplane lighter, let it fly. There's just some issues there that may have prevented the accident. We don't know why the power loss was there. But yeah, we're running out of runway. We got enough to get airborne, but just barely because of the weight in the engine. So there's things we can look at. Top accident causal factors, maneuvering and loss of control on takeoff. These are the top in North Dakota list. Okay, causal factors. This is kind of a strange one. Now this gets into national numbers. Keep in mind that an accident or an incident, when they come out, this is all accident data because this is NTSB, that the accident data, when they come up with the causal factors, there can be as many as 5 causal factors for one accident. That's the way these numbers don't add up. You said, well, there was only 444, Jay, and there's a lot more numbers there. Well, there's a lot more issues. And so personnel issues is at the top of the list, and you can see that is the national. Task performance is next, and then use of equipment, aircraft control, and pilot. Now, tell me if I change the slide. has that changed for us in North Dakota? It's exactly the same thing. Personnel issues, task performance, use of equipment, aircraft control, and pilot. It hasn't changed. Of course, the numbers are a lot less, thank God. We have a lot fewer pilots. But if you look at that, out of the total that's there, you know, we've got 11 are personnel issues. Okay, that means that we need the training. Okay, that's what it all boils down to. Accidents last year, CFIT, hit trees, hit wire, hit terrain, ran them out of gas. That has to do with planning, refueling, and pre-flight. Mechanical, turbine coupling failure and a magneto failure. Loss of control, takeoff, rough field. Landing was a descent rate was too strong, and we talked about that. That had to do with the gentleman. Again, this goes back to training, where we have a guy that gets into aviation. He's got a limited amount of experience, limited amount of hours, trained in one type of aircraft. And I can't stress this enough for you guys, that if you have a pilot coming to your organization that is new to the system, make certain that you put them in the aircraft with an instructor who has had time in that type of equipment. And not necessarily an instructor, but an experienced pilot that can walk them through the pitfalls of flying the airplane. Now, I say that with a little bit of cheek and tongue, because I know there's some white hairs out here in the audience that you guys have been flying that same Pratt & Whitney engine for probably 25 years, or 20 years anyway. There's probably a lot of things you've forgotten about that airplane that you just don't see day to day. And that's where a good turbine instructor would help out. And you got to bring them in, and that's why it's important for you guys as well to get retrained on occasion. Bring somebody in that can walk you through and get you to remember things you've forgotten about these aircraft when it comes to emergency procedures and things of that nature. Landing descent rate, again, back to that one. You know, basically what happened to this guy was he came into the system, just got his ag license, was flying a radial engined aircraft. The aircraft went down. They put him in a turbine aircraft, said, here, go fly, learn everything you need to know. Good point. Go feel good with the airplane. And he said he felt good. Of course, what was he checking how good he felt? With a dipstick? He's a new guy. There's not enough information there for him to really judge for himself whether he's ready for that flight or not. Needs an instructor, needs another eye. Anyway, he goes out, flies the airplane, sprays a couple runs. Then he decides to, well, let's push the envelope. I'll make the boss happy, and I'll make a short turn into the ramp area there. And in the process, he comes in, pulls the throttle. Now, you guys all know that when you pull the throttle real quick on a turbine aircraft, that blade flattens out, and this thing will drop like a barn. I mean, it'll drop like a safe. That barn door folds in there, and this thing it'll come right out of the sky. Well, it did, and it was probably something that he had not practiced before this, and it caught him off guard. The aircraft started to pick up a very high sink rate. By the time he figured it out, he shoved the throttle forward. Well, by then he also noticed that he's going to be landing short of the runway because he was trying for the end of the runway. And so as he shoved the throttle forward, he realized he was going to hit. He pulled the throttle back real quick. Of course, that sudden throttle up and throttle back was all within a few seconds, but it was enough to surge the engine just as he touched down and threw him off into an embankment and lost control of the aircraft and so forth. So, I mean, it's down to training. It really is down to training. Lost control VMC and IMC, I think we all pretty much understood what happened there. You know, basically he was trying to get to a field and ended up in some inadvertent IMC stuff, and it didn't work out. You know, there's some bad stuff out there. It's just not something we do. Lost control, en route and stall. You know, there was an incident there as well. So here's something we don't see every day, and this is something that you guys There we go. Now, Okay, in this particular recording, he only had about 150 gallons of water on board, and he did that in about 11 seconds. Now, the whole purpose of that training is when you do your knowledge and skill tests, and this is something that I've hung my hat on from day one since I've been in the FAA, is that one of the worst things that we can do is believe in our heads that a knowledge and skill test you guys had in 1955 is still good today. Because what you had back then was in a Pawnee, and now you're flying an air tractor. And if you really read through the regulations and you go through it, it talks about performance, weight and balance, it talks about systems. Well, that's part of the knowledge and skill test that's required before you even go out and fly these airplanes. So truly, a knowledge and skill you had in a Pawnee 35 years ago does not qualify in an airplane you're flying today, because it is supposed to be in the aircraft that you're currently operating. And so, I got to look around the room, and it was obvious in the hands that went up and those that didn't, is that, how many of you have actually gone out, thrown in a load of water, and pulled the handle, the dump handle, just to see how the airplane would react? It's amazing when you drop 200 gallons of water at 8 pounds per gallon, and you suddenly lose 1,600 pounds on an airplane that has 800 horsepower, the thing will go in the air pretty good. And the common thing I hear a lot from folks at an accident scene is, I wasn't sure what the air. Okay, number one, when was the last time any of you actually practiced dumping a load of chemical or water? Think about that. Please do. And how many of you train or go up with a CFI more than the required once every 2 years? And this is a good point that, you guys as ag pilots are only required to have a flight review to go along with your commercial certificate. And the tough part is you're going to have to go out and rent a 172, something with an extra seat, get a flight instructor, and you're actually going to have to follow the advisory circular. Now, everybody I talk to, when they talk about flight reviews, they have to do an hour of flight, an hour of ground. Well, okay, that right there is 2 endorsements, one for the flight, one for the ground. Then there's a third endorsement that you need in your logbook, which actually states that per 6156, the flight review, we did, these procedures this day, CFI George, and a number. Okay, so there's actually 3 endorsements required in your logbook for each flight review. So please remember that. The other thing is that a flight review, for all that it is a review. It's not meant for you to go to the airport, get in there, do 3 takeoffs and landings. The first 2 are bouncers and not good, or your power off landing is not that good, or maybe your aerial work is not that good. Because, it's one thing to fly an aircraft with a stick. It's another to fly one with a yoke. Difference in weight. You got an aircraft weighs 1,800 pounds versus one that weighs 8,000 pounds. These are all differences that need to be trained for, and you need to make sure that you haven't picked up some bad habits. And so really, a flight review should include an hour of training, along with that, an hour review. Because legally and by the letter, a review is simply that. It's not training. The instructor is just there to see how well you're doing. So please keep that in mind. Okay, just another note on training here. Train regularly with CFI, as we talked about. Correct your bad habits. Set performance goals. Climb 500 foot a minute, climb at 90 knots. Specifics. Give yourself something to shoot for, a training number. Train for common scenarios in aircraft, and that simply would be go out and dump a load on occasion. Load of water. Just learn how the aircraft, operates. And, the next time you have to dump a load, you may be in, say, a 30-degree bank. Well, pull the handle, see what it does. But get a feel, get a knowledge in your head of what the aircraft is going to do when these things happen. Review the aircraft performance data. Remember, all these aircraft, I don't care if they're CAM 8 or not, or CAR 8, there is some performance data for these airplanes. Review your maintenance records. Maintenance records on the aircraft. The record is something that the mechanic and you maintain and keep. But as far as responsibility for return to service, that's you. That's all on you, the airman, the pilot. Review past discrepancies. We had an operator quite a while back here that was asked to help out a friend who had lost his medical, or there was some health issue going on or something. Anyway, he went to use his airplane to spray a field. In the process, the aircraft lost power during takeoff and ended up in a swamp upside down. Lucky the guy wasn't killed. And anyway, we started checking discrepancies on the aircraft, and there had been some issues with the fuel controllers and so forth. So pre-flight when time is not an issue. And that simply means get to the airport early. I mean, yeah, I know it's bad enough. You're probably out at the airport at 5 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning. But, you know, if you need to really do a thorough pre-flight on your airplane, maybe do it the night before. Or the day that it's raining outside, start pulling inspection covers and just looking at your aircraft. Take a look and see what may have changed since that annual inspection. Really take a look. Take a flashlight with you. Check out those seat belts. Check out the, you know, all the crevices that you never normally check out. So please take the time to do that. FSDO area concerns, paperwork and logbooks are still a big issue. And so it's something you guys need to work on, or your maintenance folks need to work on. Make sure that maintenance is signed off correctly and timely. And make sure the work is done timely also. So web ops. Yes, I know that it's an Industry 135 thing, and there's a lot of it. We do a lot of stuff in the web operations, and they're not previously issued 137 operators, but they are done now. And enter all appropriate information in web ops and issue at least the required letter of authorization is what it says in that document. So the letter of authorization has these paragraphs. You guys have all got them in North Dakota. I know you do because I issued half of them. So make sure that you're checking things like, you know, you got aircraft authorization, summary of authorizations. One of the big one that we catch people on is primary business address or mailing address. You know, if you became an LLC or something like that, you need to make sure that that has a state document that proves that you can change business names. Address changes, things of that. Any DBAs, maybe you're working for another company, maybe a couple of you partnered up and now there's a whole different company name. Lists authorized aircraft is another one. You might go through an aircraft a year. Maybe you're buying and selling them all the time. Registration numbers. If things changed and say you have an aircraft that maybe went down for a year, you flew, in the process you didn't know it, but your registration died, and now you had to get a new registration and a new N number, unfortunately. Well, even though you still got the same aircraft, that all those numbers and that make, model, series, that all has to be registered with the FAA. So, and please keep in mind that the very least you have to do is notify the FAA. So in writing, talk to your principal or send him a note and say, hey, I have a new aircraft. It's November 12345, and this is the registration. This is the make, model, and series of the aircraft. We will start operating this next week while spraying. And you send a note to that inspector, that principal, and then of course they will in turn, if they have an issue with it, of course they'll call you right away, but they may take them a little bit. They'll get the web ops, but at least the FSDO's been notified. Remember, this all kind of come out of 9/11, so I want to know where those aircraft are. Itemized list of authorized or not authorized operations. So basically, if there's something like maybe there's mosquito spraying or especially airspace, stuff like that. So, FSDO area concern, AD compliance is a big one. We've had it for the last 5 years. It goes way back, as far as I can remember anyway. 50 and 100-hour inspections, people are missing that stuff. Owner-operator maintenance, if you're doing that, make sure that you're following the manufacturer's specifications when you're doing certain owner-operator maintenance. A while back, we had an issue with over-torquing on tire bolts, because you can change tires and do things of that nature, but the bolts were so over-torqued that they were almost a half-inch longer than what was originally with the spec for the aircraft. So that's a little over-torqued. So you want to make sure that your tools are properly calibrated if you're going to do that. Just make sure you're following the manufacturer's recommendations. Outdated web ops is going to be one the inspectors will be looking at, and of course we take a third of you every year, and we're required to go out and inspect and make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. So you got a 1 in 3 chance that they're going to come see you this year if they didn't last year. Operating non-authorized aircraft is going to be another thing they're going to be looking for, and maintaining the required records. Okay, so that's just stuff to be thinking about. Right of way, traffic pattern. Okay, we came up with this MOU when Larry Taborski was in there. I brought it up to him that, you know, if we could somehow get this through the Aeronautics Commission, and I think they did help us with it. In fact, I know they did for a while. But the whole purpose of the MOU when we went through it is that Part 137 states very simply that you can, as a 137 operator, you can fly right traffic at a left traffic airport. In other words, there's a deviation from the regulation. It's not an exemption, but it is a deviation at this point that it's allowed. But you also have to remember is that deviation does not qualify unless you do a couple things. Prior coordination must be made first with the airport management, and the deviation from the traffic pattern must be limited to agricultural aircraft operations, which is kind of a no-brainer because, well, for all that it is, agricultural aircraft operations is anytime you're spraying. Okay, and the operator must provide evidence of purpose if requested. Landings and takeoffs must be made from the active runways, and the aircraft must at all times remain clear and give way to other aircraft conforming to the published traffic pattern. The traffic patterns are set by the airport management. So if they set left-hand traffic, and that's in the chart supplement that way, then you must maintain left-handed traffic at that airport, regardless of what 137 says. Now, the purpose of this document was just to put it in writing so that if you make an agreement with airport management or the airport authority, and now the airport manager goes to Florida, dies of a heart attack, you don't have a contract with anybody that says you could be doing this. So you need it in writing somewhere that says, yes, I can do this. And that's where this document comes in. It's not a legal document from any shape of the word. We had our legal folks say, fine, go ahead and do it. But right at the bottom says, this is not an FAA-approved agreement. And in no way, okay, alleviates the parties from compliance with the CFRs. So it's just, and we do have these. If you need one, just kind of email me at jay.m.flowers@faa.gov, and we'll get you a copy of the MOU. Okay, FAA Form 2500-7, which is bird or other strike reports. These are also available. You can find them at wildlife.faa.gov. And that's a searchable database, actually, and they've also got the forum there as well. So if you have bird strikes, please report them. What it does is it helps airport management out in the event that there's been several bird strikes, let's say at Cooperstown or Park River or someplace. You've had a lot of bird strikes up there. Well, it gives the airport management the necessary feedback, if you will, so that when they ask for, maybe they're trying to get rid of a swamp that brings most of those ducks and geese in, or it's a field or something that brings them in, they have the ammunition necessary to go to the FAA and say, hey, we need the dollars to get rid of that. Unmanned aircraft systems, you know, we've had several, at this event, there were several folks talking about unmanned aircraft and everything goes on there. If you go to faa.gov/UAS, there's just a ton of information having to do with UAS operations, UAS aircraft, different type of exemptions that are out there and so forth. So please go to the website and hopefully that answers your questions. If not, you can give us a call. So the FAA safety team, the FAST team at faasafety.gov. This is our WINGS program. This is the largest website in the government. We literally put out over 5 million emails a month, and we are busy. So you want to take a look at a good website. I said we are changing it. Right now I'm on the committee to actually rebuild and redo this website, but it's also the holder of the WINGS program, which is a pilot proficiency program. So meetings like today, for those of you that like WINGS credit, you can go ahead and email me and say, hey, I'd like credit for taking this course through the aeronautics website here, and I can get you credit for doing that. So, okay, NAAA UAS checklist. That checklist is still out there, Inform Local Law Enforcement Report, and it has to do with these, dirty buggers out there flying their UAS and not paying attention to the fact that they have to give way to UAS or to a manned aircraft. And that doesn't mean we can fly in their way either. We need to make sure we give them time to get them down and get them on the ground. Yeah, so anytime you see a drone out there that's not supposed to be there, report it. That's the numbers we need to get enough inspectors to actually maintain the safety of the airspace. Hot topic for this is safe air charter operations. It's a hot topic for the state of North Dakota. Important information for pilots and passengers, updated December 19, 2019. Basically, if you go to this link that's on here, or the QR code with your phone, it'll take you to this website and take you to the talks about charter guidance and things of that nature. It's amazing, folks, but there are a lot of illegal charters out there, and we need to do everything we can to report them if we see them or hear of them. Just simply, we need to make the airspace safer. And these folks don't understand. A lot of the folks that are doing the illegal charters don't necessarily understand that what they're doing is illegal. That's part of the problem. Public inquiry: can you log cross-country time as an ag pilot? Okay, so any flight conducted by a pilot in an aircraft that includes a landing at a point other than the point of departure. Well, let's see. I took off from Hillsboro, I sprayed a bunch of crops, and I landed at Hillsboro. Not across country. It's flight time. So what you got to remember is that if you want this time, this ag flying time that you have to qualify for an additional rating, say if you're going to go up for a ATP or something like that that requires a plethora of cross-country flying and so forth, most of the flying you do as an ag pilot, as a 137 pilot, will not qualify as a cross-country flight. However, if you fly from, like we used to fly from Bismarck to Mandan, 7 miles away, but it is a legal cross-country flight. It's just that we can't use it for a rating because you need at least 50 miles on that leg to qualify. But it's all something that you log in your logbook, and you keep track of it that way. So that's just how you use the data is what's important. Fasting programs are here to help. The Wings Pro and the Drone Pro. The Wings Pros are out there, and their job, the Wings Pros, their job is to basically answer any information you have about the Wings program on our website, fasafety.gov. Right now, we do not have Wings Pro in North Dakota. The last Wings Pro we had was Mr. Al Scramstead, and unfortunately, he passed away in the last year here. Our Drone Pros are Joey Schmidt, he's out of Fargo, and Jakey Stoltz out of Grand Forks. And Jakey was also at the UMass talking about drones and so forth in the test sites. Michelle Carroll, who's out of Park River, is actually working a lot in Fargo area in the eastern half of the state. Tom Schroeder is with the Burley County Sheriff's Office in Bismarck, and he's one of our other drone pros. And these folks are there to answer any questions you may have with regard to drones. And so those can be found also on fasafety.gov under the directory. You can go under resources and directory, and it'll pull right up for North Dakota. And that's basically about it. So any questions you've got, feedback, whatnot, here's our QR code, or you can just type in Fast Team Feedback in your internet browser, and it'll take you right to the web page where you can put in feedback for this briefing or any other briefings that we have across the state. If you want to get a hold of the office, you can contact the Fargo office here at 701-492-5800, and any one of the inspectors will be more than happy to help you get through your day-to-day ops. And that's all I've got for you on that. And so with that, I'm going to finish up. I want to thank the North Dakota Aeronautics for the time to submit this message for their offering to you folks for their training. And if you have any questions for me, you can get a hold of me, Jay Flowers, 701-226-6283. Be happy to help with any questions you've got. Thank you very much.